Hey everybody, Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com to talk about the most disappointing storyline payoffs in wrestling history. These are storylines that had a lot of potential and a lot of promise, but when they were all said and done, you were left disappointed and you were wishing that it had gone in a different direction. I got a lot of responses here from people on Facebook and Twitter, and I've compiled a list here of what many feel are the most disappointing storyline payoffs ever. So let's start off with one that was fairly recent that most people watching this video will remember. I'm talking about the Nexus invasion of WWE. It started off red hot. You had the Season 1 NXT stars coming out of nowhere as a big surprise at the end of Raw, and they were all bonded together as a unit, and they just destroyed John Cena, and they destroyed the entire ringside area. They tore up the ring. They destroyed the announce tables. You had Daniel Bryan using Justin Roberts' necktie as a weapon. It was awesome. It was cutting edge. It was something that did not feel like it was scripted. It didn't feel like it was part of the show. For the first time in a while in WWE, it felt like things were out of control. So it had a great start, but then it was all downhill from there. First of all, you have Daniel Bryan being released, and he was arguably the most talented member of the group with the most potential. So that was a huge disappointment. And then at SummerSlam, you had Team Nexus versus Team Cena. You thought Nexus would get the rub here and be elevated, but no, Super Cena has to prevail, of course. And then you had Survivor Series. You had Wade Barrett going for the WWE title with John Cena as the referee, and it was a tease that maybe John Cena would join Nexus and help Wade Barrett win the title. And maybe this would be a new beginning in WWE, the start of a new era. But no, John Cena has to do the right thing, and Wade Barrett loses. And then you have Wade Barrett and other guys going to SmackDown and forming the core. And then you have the new Nexus on Raw led by CM Punk. But Nexus is never really the same after that. So certainly Nexus could have been done a lot better. Next up, a lot of people mentioned this one, the higher power storyline. I think a lot of people were disappointed because they were expecting something that made logical sense, and it ended up being Vince McMahon pulling back the hood and being the guy behind it. And it didn't make sense because for several months you had Vince McMahon feuding with The Undertaker, and now all of a sudden they're aligned again, and it's revealed that they were working together all along, which, you know, why would Vince take all those beatings and why would he go through all that crap? You know, it was very far-fetched, but I personally thought it was entertaining. I thought that Vince going, "It's me, Austin, it was me all along," and then Jared going, "Oh, son of a bitch." I mean, I thought it was entertaining, so I wouldn't say it was all that disappointing. And, you know, it was during the Attitude Era, and WWE rarely made much sense, but it didn't matter. I mean, the point was you were entertained, and I thought it was entertaining, and, you know, it was just part of the show for me, just another Raw. Aces and Eights invading TNA. This one, I think, is a huge disappointment. You had Sting announced as the first guy to go into the TNA Hall of Fame, and then the next night he gets jumped by a bunch of masked guys. So it's kind of intriguing right from the start. And I thought maybe it would lead to Jeff Jarrett being the guy revealed as the one masterminding it. And that would make sense because Jeff Jarrett could say that he's jealous that Sting was the first guy inducted into the Hall of Fame and not him, since he was the guy that helped build the company and get it off the ground. So, I mean, that was a storyline I felt that would have been interesting and, you know, would have made sense. But then you had Devon revealed as the first guy in Aces and Eights. And I guess this was okay because you had Devon, you know, people knew that he was released from TNA, and he was the television champion when he was released, so you could play up that. So, I mean, that wasn't a big deal, but then you started having the guys unmasked, guys like Luke Gallows and Mike Knox and D'Lo Brown as the vice president. I mean, it was one disappointment after another, guys who were mid-carders in WWE at best in this faction. And it really did feel like a watered-down NWO, like a second-rate NWO. And there was nothing all that original about the group. I mean, it was pretty clear it was a knockoff of not just the NWO, but Sons of Anarchy. And you even had the pay-per-view poster look exactly like a Sons of Anarchy poster. So nothing unique about this faction, and just the same old heel storyline, stable, whatever. Just one letdown after another. GTV This was something that got a lot of people talking. Who is this mystery person filming people with the hidden cameras? And it would go on week after week after week, and you kept wondering who's behind this. And as it turns out, we never found out. I mean, there was speculation at first when it started that it was Goldust behind GTV. Obviously, the G standing for Goldust, but nothing ever came of it, and you know, the storyline just faded away, and that was it, with no payoff. So, I mean, it's disappointing because we got no payoff, period. The mystery Hummer driver. This was in WCW in 1999. WCW was desperate to try to turn the ratings war around, so they had the storyline where somebody was driving a Hummer, and the Hummer crashed into Kevin Nash's limousine. So, who was the attacker? We never really found out. I mean, we didn't find out that year in 1999. They just dropped the storyline, and you know, for several months they were teasing who was behind it, but there was never any conclusion to the storyline. And then in 2000, a year later, they kind of tried to wrap it up by having Bischoff be revealed with Kidman as the guy driving the Hummer. But whatever. I mean, it was just a stupid storyline, and once again, a storyline without any real payoff, period. Vince McMahon's $1 Million Mania. This was something that was a big deal in 2008. Vince McMahon was giving away $1 million every week, and you know, one would think that this would make for some really entertaining television, and it would lead to some kind of big storyline. But you know, the highlight of it was Vince getting rickrolled on national television. I mean, that was really the funniest moment of it. And the storyline just abruptly ended. The $1 Million Mania ended with pieces of the set falling on Vince McMahon, and it looked so tacky and so fake. It was awful, and it was such a letdown because you thought this whole $1 Million Mania was going to lead to something, and that was it. A bunch of pillars falling on Vince, and didn't even look like anything hit him, so it was really dumb. Who ran over Steve Austin? To say this was a disappointment would be an understatement. You had this big storyline with Stone Cold coming back. He was gone for almost a year, out of action with neck surgery, and you were going to see who was this guy that was his attacker, who was the guy that ran him down in storyline and caused him to be gone for almost a year. Was it Triple H? Was it The Rock? Was it a new guy coming in? It was Rikishi. Rikishi hadn't even debuted on television when Steve Austin got run over. And he was this beloved babyface with Too Cool. He was really over with Too Cool. The group was extremely over. So you turn the guy heel suddenly for no reason. Well, his reason is he did it for The Rock. So, I mean, really stupid reveal and just a huge letdown. And Rikishi's heel turn did not last long, and they tried to salvage the angle by having Triple H be revealed as the guy that convinced Rikishi to do it. So, I mean, they really tried to save it, but, you know, just didn't work out. The WWE's version of the NWO. There was so much hype, you know, with the NWO coming to WWE, and you know, it had a lot of people excited. Hogan, Hall, and Nash all back, and you thought that, you know, we'd have a brand new NWO invasion, and it would make for some entertaining television. But right from the get-go, it was a letdown because you had Hogan, Hall, and Nash come out, and instead of acting like invaders, they were just acting like they were part of the roster, and you know, it wasn't the same NWO. It was watered down, and Hogan quickly went back to being a babyface, and then Kevin Nash got hurt, and it was just one thing after another. Scott Hall ended up being released. You know, the NWO, they tried to bring Big Show back as an NWO member, and X-Pac, but it just wasn't the same. The magic was gone. And then they had Shawn Michaels come back, and you thought maybe the NWO would have a new start here and would gain some momentum. But then Kevin Nash, in his first match back from injury, tears his quad, and that's officially the end of the NWO. So, one disappointment after another, and just a very sad end to one of the greatest factions in wrestling history. The AJ Styles scandal from last year, 2012. When this first started, I was really excited about it. You know, I thought that Kazarian and Daniels were doing a great job as heel characters, and you know, they were bringing up this possible scandal between AJ Styles and Dixie Carter, and it was compelling. I was interested to see what was going to happen next. But then Claire Lynch came into the mix, and that completely killed the storyline for me. Her acting was beyond atrocious and just unbearable to watch. I mean, I couldn't even watch it, and this is my job to watch these shows. I mean, it was just torture watching her on television. She had no business being on national television. Terrible actress. TNA, if they paid her money, they got ripped off heavily. And I think it did a lot of harm for AJ Styles. I mean, it hurt his character, and you know, it could have been something tremendous for him and Kazarian and Daniels. Could have been an all-time classic storyline. Instead, it was just another disappointment from TNA. Mr. McMahon's Death / illegitimate son. I put these two together because they were related, and you know, Vince McMahon went into the limo, blew up, and we all thought his character was dead. And it was a very shocking storyline and, you know, interesting storyline to actually kill off a character in that fashion by having him blow up in a limousine. But then the whole Chris Benoit thing went down, and WWE had to, you know, change direction. And originally the plan was for Mr. Kennedy to be revealed as the illegitimate son as part of the Vince McMahon, Mr. McMahon Death storyline. So, you know, they had to bring Mr. McMahon, Vince McMahon, back on television after the Chris Benoit incident. But, you know, they tried to keep the storyline going with the illegitimate son. And Mr. Kennedy was going to be revealed as Vince's illegitimate son and get a huge push out of that. But then Mr. Kennedy got suspended. So that threw everything out the window again. They had to change plans again. And they could have gone with somebody else. They could have gone... Some wrestler could have gotten a huge rub from this storyline as Vince's illegitimate son, but it's revealed as Hornswoggle. Hornswoggle is Vince McMahon's illegitimate son. And, you know, they could have done so much with this, and that was our payoff. For several months, the limo exploding, all this hype, the DNA tests, it's Hornswoggle. Really? All right, the anonymous Raw GM. You know, this was going on for about a year, and you had this anonymous GM making matches, and, you know, Michael Cole reading off the computer, and you were wondering who was behind it. I mean, there were so many different ways this could have ended. You could have had Ric Flair be revealed as the anonymous GM, Mick Foley. There's so many people you could have put in that spot, and you could have had a payoff, but instead, it just faded away. The anonymous Raw GM just disappeared, and that was the end of it. Almost a year of having to put up with the ringtone sound every time there's an announcement, and we got nothing out of it. So, huge letdown. And finally, the #1 most disappointing storyline payoff in wrestling history. The Alliance Invasion. I think most people would agree with me on this, that this is the #1 most disappointing storyline. Not that it didn't have its moments, because it did. You know, there were some very memorable angles in the Invasion storyline. But, you know, right from the get-go, what it was supposed to be was WCW started over as a brand, and a new WCW led by Shane McMahon, and it was going to be the beginning of a new era in the wrestling business. But then you had the fateful night in Tacoma, Washington. They tried to begin the WCW relaunch with Booker T versus Buff Bagwell for the WCW title, or the WWF title, as Scott Hudson put it. And it was a complete disaster. The crowd hated it. They didn't want to see anything related to WCW. They booed the guys out of the building. And Vince McMahon, you know, right after that decided to change plans. And you had the ECW brand make a comeback, and they changed direction, where now it was WCW and ECW combined as a unit to try to take over WWE. And you know what? The debut of the Alliance was really awesome. The way they did it, with having all the guys from ECW staring down the WCW guys, and then they turn around and stand together, and they're staring at the WWF guys. I mean, that was a great segment. And then Paul Heyman announcing the return of ECW, and then at the end of the show announcing the Alliance. I mean, it was really well done. That was a great Raw. And then you had the Invasion pay-per-view, and it did a huge pay-per-view buy rate. I mean, it was one of the biggest non-WrestleMania pay-per-view buy rates in wrestling history. But then you had Steve Austin turn heel and join the Alliance, and that made absolutely no sense. You know, Steve Austin broke his neck during the Monday Night Wars trying to help WWE win the Monday Night War. So why would he join these guys? didn't make any logical sense. Nobody wanted to see Steve Austin as a heel. And, you know, the WCW guys were getting buried. Instead of elevating them and making them a serious threat to the WWE, you had Booker T doing jobs. You had DDP losing to The Undertaker's wife. It was just one thing after another where, you know, the WCW and ECW guys were seen as jokes. And the ratings quickly dipped. And, you know, this is a storyline that could have dragged out at least a year, maybe even 2 years. You could have done a bunch of dream matches. You could have had more invasion-type pay-per-views. They could have done huge pay-per-view buy rates. But it fizzled out in 6 months. I mean, the whole thing started with the invasion pay-per-view, and then 6 months later, or less than 6 months later, at Survivor Series, it was all over, and that was the end of it. So, very disappointing. I mean, they could have done so much with the invasion storyline, but, you know, WWE had to have their guys go over, and they refused to push the WCW and ECW guys. I mean, there were so many. I mean, it was so easy, but, you know, WWE didn't want to do it, and you know, they made a little bit of money off the invasion pay-per-view, and there were some interesting moments, but overall, I mean, it could have been so much more. So that'll do it for my thoughts on the most disappointing storyline payoffs. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment, youtube.com/NoDQCAW, and stay tuned to NoDQ.com for the very latest in WWE and TNA.